So let me talk a little bit about UiPath for those that might not be familiar with us. As Ron had said, we are a process automation company as the market dictates. We really started several years ago focusing on that process automation as you hear in the market, copy, paste, click, 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 navigational sequences. You heard the low code moniker that just came before. It is a platform that was built by an engineer who used to work for Microsoft that said, you know what? I'm doing the same stuff over and over again. Wouldn't it make sense for me to put the power in the business's hands so I could focus on the really cool projects that require a lot of complexity? And that was Daniel Dinez, and he created UiPath 15 years ago, and here we are, and we're the largest robotic process automation organization in the market right now, per defined by Gartner and Forrester. Many know that we went IPO about a year ago today. Fortunately, victim of the market of the tech industry like everyone else right now, but still a leader in the space, especially in healthcare. A lot of people don't know that actually UiPath has the second largest enterprise technology footprint in healthcare today, and that's global. I happen to have the fortune of managing that for the last 4 years. So let me talk a little bit about who we are and what we're trying to accomplish without getting into the nitty-gritty of low code or exactly what the product is. I'll give you some educational tips afterwards. So there's a couple of 4 pillars that we really look at. One, assigning automatable work to robots. So if it's something that I can give a whole workforce of automation to do, I don't want to build a robot for one specific need. We'll talk a little bit about IT automation and some examples, but if I can assign it to a robot, I'm going to do that. But the key here is I don't want to build a robot per task. I want to build all those tasks and then have it assign it to the robotic workforce. Why is that important? Because that means I can really build that digital competency without a massive footprint. We always like to say we're a low barrier to entry to automation, and that's right. You could build hundreds of workflows for free, and it's as good as the capacity of the robots you buy. Just like your human workforce, if I need to have 80 people working that process and I need to do it double time, I do swing shift. Our robots build the same way. We're finding, especially right now, upskilling is really important to keep people. I focus very much on healthcare. That's my competency. I'm working with clinical offices right now at the operational level, making automation a piece of their upskilling because we found that the potential of them staying within the organization is much higher. So now they're doing their job, but they're building robots to actually satisfy a team need that otherwise would have been difficult before, and they would have pretty much put the bear on your IT team to manage. So IT managed, business led. To do that, we also democratize, meaning that if we can make them the developer, we can in very safe guardrailed ways, which our products do. And the last piece is AI. I know you all work with AI. I think you talked a lot about AI today, whether it's cybersecurity, IT automation, predictive analysis, clinical outcomes. Deployment is a bigger issue. I mean, if I could take the insight and take action to it, which 60% of those actions are automatable, I want to make that as seamless as possible without having you to buy a whole bunch of middleware that adds another $1 to $2 million of technical debt on top of your program. These are all things that we want to accomplish with our platform today. And when you hear UiPath, really sets us apart. And like I said, it is an emulation. It is a low-code software. It's not built specific for healthcare. It's not built specific for banking. It's not built specific for IT. It's built specific for all processes because it sees, it thinks, it do, and it does action. So before I get into those IT examples, let's talk a little bit about that platform. When you hear automation, like I said, we kind of fall into that vernacular, but we're really a lot more. We're really that house of cards of process engineering, process optimization. Your IT teams do this looking across products all together. Define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Our whole platform is built to do that. We have tools that discover automation potential naturally, whether it's your team saying, hey, I have a problem with cybersecurity InfoSec where I have policies and postures I want to automate. I have an idea. How do I get that idea out to build? We have tools that do that. We also have tools that look at those process tasks called process mining, task mining, and identify it for you. making the ability to close that gap faster. We have that low-code development suite built for not only your IT team, which is a technical version, very complex, allows you to pull AI into it, but also ones for the enterprise business user that's similar like a Visio, and then an even easier one that's more for what we call the citizen developer that feels like a very low-code drag and drop application that uses cards, something similar to a Trello. We have the manage the ability, we have orchestration. Orchestration can be on-premise, and we also have a completely cloud-based product now too, that not only is HIPAA certified, but will be HITRUST certified within the year. And then we have a bunch of products underneath that do everything from building total experiences to low-code application on the desktop. So if I want to take attended automation, which are the robots that we like to say work as a digital assistant on your computer, and you're trying to find a solution for all your clinicians within a certain department to do quality control reporting, instead of buying an application, if I could build an application using robots without having to solve integration problems, EMR challenges, cybersecurity problems, compliance problems, and I could put the control in the business but governed by IT, you would build that application in UiPath, integrate it with robots, and solve all those problems in a matter of less than 14 weeks. And this is one example of how customers are using us today and how IT is solving some of these problems. With that said, I wanted to talk very much into the IT digital journey and related use cases I think you could take away with today. So when you talk about what are the three areas that really automation and UiPath itself is driving today in the IT area, it's three. One, it's really transforming the operational process. We talk about infrastructure, service management, security and compliance. All these require audit, report, regulations, policies, and postures that you have to run through very manually. You might actually have multiple sites that you control and manage and have to take action right away. We find a lot of organizations find success in automating these processes, so that way you could be totally remote and be able to shut off that port, turn off that user's access, be able to push that antiviral control, or even better, testing certain load balances so that a human doesn't have to do that. You can transform that experience, whether it's your internal customer or external customer. I mean, when you're building with automation, you can create that total experience. I'll show you that example in a moment, but then you start talking about elements of self-service, integrations with your chatbots. You talk about integrations with web portals, or I have multiple web portals and I'm trying to bring that together with my IVR to create an omni-channel experience. Who actually does that today? Humans. By automating, you have an effective way of creating a composable network. And the last piece, of course, it's really that business model. Now, how can I make things more proactive instead of reactive? We like to call space-time continuum. Just because the process works sequentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doesn't mean once you automate it first, it has to work that way. So you can create new life cycles. You can create new cycle times. You can reevaluate old homegrown platforms that were kind of in the mix and eliminate them from access, but still be as a part of the process. So that way you can do parallel environments. And of course, if you can use your AML scripting right into the product, you can do that now too. So kind of going into some of those key topics, I wanted to outline this, and this was allowed by my friends at Gartner, and this is the technology spend for this year. And, looking at 3 or 4 key areas, and it probably doesn't surprise you. Normally, when people look at our platform, they kind of fit into the hyper automation direct spend or the AI spend. But you know what? This isn't really where UiPath gets most of its revenue. It's not where the customers typically consume us. It's in building migrations to cloud platforms. It's about closing cybersecurity gaps. It's about bringing a different layer of API integration and automating first where there's no interoperability. And those I heard Epic talked about before, no bilateral API. And then my most important feature, especially in the payer side, total experience. How can I create a composable environment to bring a total experience so my member and my analyst can coordinate the same level of work? Most people don't think about automation in this space. They realize and think through automation as being just kind of a tool to bridge that hyper automation or bring in AI. But the reality is all this is process. So when you think about digitizing process for the new way of work, automation has to be there, and UiPath fits into all these buckets, not just in this hyper automation bucket. It's a very different way of thinking about, and that's reality where we make most of our revenue, not here, but across here. So let's dive into a couple of these with some examples. So when I talk about the total experience, it really is creating that full integration. Those look very similar to the tech stack you work today. You have all the work that requires the front end input, whether this is a ticket, whether this is a posture, whether this is a customer internally submitting a request. I mean, right now I'm working with hospitals trying to verge the 54 million in-basket items they're doing on a daily basis. It's impossible to create a platform all for that. Epic has tried. Epic is a really good EMR, not a really good rules and task manager. So how do I create a better integration layer there to reduce that cycle time and improve that outcome? So creating that with automation improves that demand shift from being very manual to being, really more service bound. Those that are working through chatbots right now, chatbots are great. It pains me when a chatbot is more type in text and someone on the other end responds. If there isn't an automated response to that, or there's a way to schedule an appointment or to be able to look up a piece of information after verifying yourself, automation is the key to closing that gap without you having to make new investments in new platforms. God knows there's a new platform every day. It can help with that demand fulfillment. They said it can respond on the other side, create that process. I work very heavily with life science organizations too. I heard COVID a lot. We're still talking about COVID. Organizations, laboratory organizations, one that you probably know really well, from a lab perspective, used UiPath to actually process orders for hand sanitizer when there was nobody working in there. They were getting service tickets through ServiceNow. There was nobody around to actually process them. They implemented automation within 3 weeks, and they were able to manage that capacity. The next one is demand reduction. So task, reporting, actually creating that demand. There's a lot of things that could be pushed to self-surface, right? Things that you can process from a data perspective. And the last one is just eliminating that demand altogether. So sorry about that. The policy of working from home. So sorry, Ron. So sorry about that. Running right from the airport to home to have the call. So let's finish this up a little bit to understand some of these use cases. The one thing to know about all of this when we talk about IT, event-driven automation, process automation, application automation, one of the key things, especially from a healthcare perspective, that's really new with the UiPath platform is we also have full FHIR and EDI integration now into UiPath. So a lot of you might have a BizTalk server. You might be using Apogee to do API integration, EDI integration through X12, maybe a MuleSoft to do that processing. We've actually built that live into our platform. So now when you're doing things like post-claim edits, or pre-claim edits coming through that EDI 835. If you're trying to bridge the gap right now in doing enrollment data or population health data between your EMR and, let's say, CMS, that's all driven through a FHIR format. A lot of organizations right now are trying to buy middleware or use BizTalk or use a MuleSoft or use an exchange to try to move that data from A to B securely and safely. But the problem is the processes aren't built on either end. So what organizations are doing now is they're using automation to move that data back and forth, transform it live, and actually take action on that data. So if I want to pull demographics from Epic and I want to sanitize it against my CRM, create a contact list, and do an outbound call for care management, let's say a COVID test report, or to be able to update a patient on a change of appointment, that can now be done directly all in the UiPath platform instead of having multiple technologies bound together and duct taping a solution. So I'm going to move on a little bit here because I chewed 3 minutes with dogs barking. But through that whole life cycle, some of the key pieces also from an IT perspective, I think you understand the integration and how automation works. But know that also, especially with the UiPath platform, we have now also brought in test management. We have a whole test suite, and testing really changed the game for a lot of IT organizations. I have a lot of healthcare organizations right now using UiPath to do the Epic testing on Hyperdrive coming in right now, because they found it has a high rate of data intake for that regression testing. I have one hospital up north that was able to process 500,000 lines of test cases through their Epic test harness using UiPath. They were able to do it in one sitting instead of multiple days, which a lot of the test platforms need you to separate. A matter of fact, I talked to Epic, who have Gremlin, their testing product, and they said that our product was close, if not near, to their Gremlin application that they created just for Epic. So, testing has become a new competency of us. It makes sense from an automation perspective. Not only can you automate the regression or the testing of separate products if you build automation from that perspective, but you can test your automations. So that fear of, is it going to break? Even though the AI built into the platform reduces that, now you can actually test a lot of this up front before someone actually puts fingers on a keyboard or the robot starts at the beginning of the day, and catch changes in websites, catch changes in policies, catch changes within, EMRs or any of your case management systems, whereas maybe you're driving that from a SaaS solution and you're not quite sure if the change is going to happen. So I'm going to give you a quick example of what this looks like from an automation perspective. You've never seen it. Here's a good example of an AI integration into UiPath. If you're familiar with prior authorization, this is from a vendor called Allscripts. You're probably familiar with Allscripts. This is one of their test functions. Ian Maurer allowed me to use this for the demonstration. And what you're going to see is actually a full prior authorization submitted. We work with an AI company that does all the authorization requirements as a SaaS. And similar to some of the other solutions you saw today, I can build it all in UiPath, but also integrate seamlessly into other technologies they use. This is a very popular SaaS product called Mindshift. And what you're going to see is a full integration between Allscripts, Mindshift using UiPath. Why? There is no API out for clinical charts. There's no API out and back forth for eligibility and benefit verification. These are all services that from an IT perspective, you tend to want to try to build for your customers, but have a hard time doing or trying to figure out what exchange has it or what product company has the minimum requirements. When you have automation, it really eliminates that interoperability gap because you're solving it the same way a human would on the UI, but safely and securely. So as you can see, it's just walking through. And this is what we mean by process automation. This is at the UI level today when you're seeing this example, but know that in a normal example, this is sitting on a server, as you could see. It's coming through a Citrix VDI, and it normally sits on the background. We call that unattended automation. So at the end of the day, this is actually happening on a server and no one even knows it's happening. So I'm going to pause that and I'm going to move on just from a timing perspective. So let's talk a little bit about how automation applies to some of these other unique topics. And I'm just watching the time here. Cybersecurity from an orchestration perspective. I've seen this a lot for SOAR. I have a life science customer, Regeneron, who actually mitigated several attacks on their servers about a year ago. They had built automation around not only the threat detection, but also their incident response. Just like right now, we have a shortage of nurses. They had a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. They had 9 sites, didn't have enough people working it. There was a threat that came through. They had to close ports off. They do have a SOAR application, but it didn't take action. It was more threat detection and reporting. Automation took that insight and took action, went through the computers, closed off the port, thwarted the attack. So you can automate a lot of those control tests. You can automate those outcomes. You can automate those postures that you want to take as a nuclear option, push the button, close it off. I also have a cybersecurity company that we work with who integrated UiPath into their teams they were using another product popular by Microsoft and it wasn't robust enough. So they used UiPath to actually do one-click intervention through Teams into the customer's policies and procedures. So if there was an incident, you could do a one-click connect to the cybersecurity team. They would walk through the policy and posture and then be able to actually execute it on their side through Teams to that person's terminal. So we talk about like chatbot. Instead of chatbot, they use Teams instead, which is another communication tool. So very instant from a cybersecurity perspective. Not a cybersecurity organization, but it is used heavily to create interoperability and take action. We talk about cloud. We talked about testing a moment ago. We are on our own cloud journey, so we should know, but a lot of organizations are managing cloud. Think about all those charts you got to migrate. Think about all the data integrations. Think about the APIs. Migration is one of the biggest use cases right now. We saw that total experience. You saw everything in front of it. So migration is really big. So being able to handle migration, test those products, do summarization. I have one organization that's using automation to pull all the XMLs out, categorize them, summarize them, tag them, migrate them up to the cloud. And then there's actually an audit performed by the robot on its own work to make sure that what came across is accurate. Of course, on the backside, you can automate those validations. We talked about product testing, but you can use automation to do those audits, to do those code remediations. I do have health systems that right now that pre-configure benefit profiles. I know that's a little bit different, but in adjacent, it's creating those configuration files and running them through. The testing, test manager, regression testing, and then of course deploying. So once you have anything out in the cloud, it's making sure that it's working accurately. Really good example. I worked with CMS on a program around growth charts in Amazon. They had an issue getting the data up to AWS. They used our document understanding product to actually get it up there. So we automate documents here at UiPath as well. Then we used Fire to put it up on the service. And then the data then transformed automatically in AWS to populate the growth chart. But then that growth chart detail had to then be pushed down to a Blue Button app that they had built. So UiPath was actually used to do all the transformation, migration, and then the app testing on the back end post-deployment. So that's kind of a quick run through of UiPath and some IT automation spaces. And with the time, Ron, I'm going to check chat here and see what we have.